Hello, in this video I'm going to be looking at the Waffentrager Auf E 100, or the Waffen F 1.0 as they have renamed it and given it a camo. Some disclaimers. I call this tank broken because it is, but broken is not the same as OP. Please note that and remember that as I talk about the tank. Broken is when a tank is extremely good at something. For example, the Ho-Ri is broken in terms of its penetration, the Grilla in terms of its accuracy, the Waffen in terms of its pure damage output for 7 seconds. However, this tank outside of those 7 seconds is just weak. Well, not weak, but, you know, it's vulnerable, it can be dealt with. Its sort of effectiveness relies purely on those 7 seconds, and in those 7 seconds, it's uncounterable, basically. So, with that out of the way, this tank has 2 guns, hence I have 2 videos. This one is about the big gun, the 15cm with high alpha and 3 shells. If you want a review of the other gun or just gameplay of it, there is another video up at the exact same time as this one, which has the full review of that. So because of that, there will be some overlapping sections, such as the armor and the mobility, but I'll try to cover those relatively quickly, because this is just about the gun. So, how to get this tank. Wargaming is giving us the embargo date of the 26th of December, however they haven't given us the MBTB or BZ176, so I believe the event for this tank is not starting on the 26th of December. I think Wargaming is just letting us hype up the tank a bit. However, that event will be the same style as the Gala Party, which is the one we had last year, well, this year in January, with the Kampfpanzer 68, the ST62 version 2, and the FV1066 Senlak. Also in the same style of the Rammer event, which was in August, which had also the Rammer, the Annihilator, and the Smasher. So it's that style of event where basically you open crates for real money to get currency. Once you have enough currency, you can buy either the BZ176 or the MBTB. However, the Waffentrager will only drop via a small drop chance in those crates, which I believe is 0.1% in those regular crates, and every 10 of those regular crates you get a single crate which has a 3% chance to drop this tank. Basically, this tank is going to be rare. Wargaming has specifically said that it will be rare. They haven't said how rare or, you know, in what ways it will be rare. They've just said it's rare. So, yeah. So, this vehicle, what is the Waffentrager? It's a tank which is balanced fully on its damage output within 7 seconds, as I've said before. So it has 2 guns. One has 5 shells with lower alpha damage but faster intra-clip, better penetration, better accuracy, better aim time, but definitely slightly worse on its damage output per shot. Well, significantly worse on its damage output per shot. The other gun is this one, which I'm going to be talking about in this video. High alpha damage, decent penetration, still very good compared to heavy tanks and general tier 10. Still relatively okay gun handling, however, definitely for a tank destroyer, not as impressive. But what's really scary about this gun is that it does 570 alpha with 3 shells and a 3.53 second intra-clip. Also, since it's a 15cm gun, it's got very scary HE shells. So, basically, it's a gun, a tank which does all its damage in 7 seconds and is very scary at that. However, outside of that, its armor is relatively weak and mediocre, and its mobility, while good, isn't enough to sort of save it in that 30 seconds when it is reloading. So, you might be asking, what's the better gun? Since this tank is one of the first to have 2 guns since the Scavenger. The Definitely the better gun is the big gun, the 15cm, which has 3 shells. That's the one I'm talking about in this video. However, the other gun is still good. It's not as good, it doesn't fit the meta as well, just because you can't trade damage as easily. Once you start shooting with the other gun, people will know you're an autoloader very quickly, because you shoot one, they're like, oh, I've taken a shot. You shoot the second one after 1.8 seconds, and then they're like, oh, it's an autoloader, I'm going to pull into cover. And by that second shot on the other gun, you've done 680 damage. However, if it's this gun, you shoot them once, they get shot, they're like, oh, damage. You shoot them again, they're like, oh crap, it's an autoloader, but this time, since you have 570 alpha, you have done 1140 damage, which is a big contrast to the 680 of the other gun. Of course, it does take slightly longer, and you do miss more often, but the impact of that high alpha damage in trading is just very significant. So this gun, definitely the better one, it fits the meta more. However, I'll say personally, I like the other gun more, because it's just more fun to play. But let's finally get into the vehicle. Oh, by the way, if you want to tell the guns apart, there is a way. The longer gun is the small gun. You can see that its barrel diameter is very slightly less than the gun down here, which is the big gun, the 15cm, which has bigger alpha damage. The main way to tell them apart, of course, is the length of the barrel. However, if you can tell the thickness is different, then there's that as well. Of course, these two guns also, with how fast the intro clip is and the gun sound, which is different, you will also be able to tell based on that. Me and some other players have sort of suggested that the gun of the Waffentrager is changed, so the 15cm is a bit more obvious, because it does actually help a lot to be able to deal with this tank in battle. And one of the big counters to it is sort of based on this tank's intro clip, or whether it can out-reload you and whatnot and out-trade you, so it is quite important that players are actually able to tell the difference. But, you know, right now, it's just you'll have to base it on the gun length. Don't know if Wargaming will even listen to that suggestion to add the muzzle brake. But yeah, Waffentrager Auf E 100. There is a review on my website if you do want to check that out without the commentary. So, armor. Here you can see it against AP 285. You can see its upper plate does actually have armor. That's because this is an E100 hull. Not quite as strong as an E100, but still fairly close. Upper plate is between 325 and 390, so you can actually get ricochets off it if enemies aren't face hugging you, and you know, if they don't know how to aim for the turret somehow. Other than this, though, you can see the rest of the tank is very weak. The lower plate only 170. The turret front at strongest is 130mm thick, but at weakest it's 5. And I'll sort of show where those areas are. So switching to HE, you'll be able to tell. Well, actually you won't, because this colour of blue is very deceptive for switching to HE. If you look at it here, you'll sort of be thinking, oh, well, yes, I can see exactly where to penetrate. It's these areas around the gun. But if you compare that to sort of a live situation where you're sort of having to aim for the tank, it's a bit hard to tell with these alternating blue colours of the hull and the turret, since it's really not that much different to the, well, uncoloured blue of the front penetrable areas, and you'll be able to see the sort of contrast when we switch to Blitz kit. So here you can see the green areas are penetrable, and the yellow areas are not. Look how different it is when you look at it in game. Of course, green highlight is a very obvious colour, but the yellow should be a lot more sort of visible on the turret of the Waffentrager, but it's not, just because this blue colour is sort of messing with the highlight, which makes it kind of annoying to deal with as an enemy in game. Generally, I'd recommend just don't shoot the turret with HE unless you're in very close range, the Waffentrager isn't moving their turret much, and you just have a clean shot on these areas. So, the areas under the gun and to the left, in this case, are 48 to 52mm thick, that's here. The gun area itself is between 5 and 12, and then there's this viewport binocular thing up here, which is 5mm. One thing to note, you can just shoot the gun, it's not spaced. So other than this right here, this whole area, this T-shaped sort of thing, is not spaced armor, so you can shoot above the gun and below it, despite it looking like it would be spaced in game because it's part of the gun mount. It's not. You can shoot there with HE, but basically you can't HE penetrate the armor on this tank, other than the turret sides, or other than if you have HESH, just because generally it's between 105 and 130 thick. So skipping the gun for the moment, looking at mobility, this tank has okay mobility, 38 top speed, 12 in reverse. 12 is nice compared to the 4005, but in tier 10 overall it's just nothing too impressive. Traverse is good at almost 41, and on medium terrain at almost, well, at 31. It's pretty okay, it's nothing too impressive on medium terrain. It does weigh 84 tons, so it has a very strong engine of 1472 horsepower. Acceleration rate is great, 17.6 and 13.5 on medium terrain. Compared to an actual E100, this is amazing. Compared to all tanks in tier 10, this is pretty okay, pretty average mobility. So yeah, mobility is okay. It's not quite as good as the 4005 other than that reverse speed, but it's not too far off, which is pretty nice. So next, let's look at the gun. As said before, I'm only looking at the 15cm in this review. Yeah, that's updated now. So 15cm with 3 shells. The other review has the one for the smaller gun. So 570 damage on AP, 480 on heat, and 870 on HE. These damage numbers are fairly normal, especially when you compare them to the Grilla. It has 10 more damage on AP, I believe 10 less on heat, or the same on heat, and then 10 less on HE. The HE damage is actually very nice, especially when you compare it to other tanks with the same alpha damage, well, similar, such as a Foch or a Ho-Ri, which they have less than 700 HE damage for 560 alpha. So this one does actually have very nice HE, and you can use that HE on enemies which use the spool liner provision. So the damage you do with HE is 696, which is still a lot more than the 570 you do on AP, so HE is still worth using on tanks with spool liner. 3 shells in the magazine, which is really impressive considering the Foch has 2, and this tank also has a faster intraclip of 3.53, so in just over 7 seconds you can do 1710 damage. And note, this tank has the shell reload booster, so with that activated your intraclip reload goes down to 2.47, which means under 5 seconds you can do 1710 damage, which is terrifying. Magazine reload 29, that is extremely long. It's longer than any tank in game, and this is the big balancing factor of the vehicle. Like I said before in the intro, this tank is completely broken when it is unloading the damage in that 7-second time. However, outside of that, it's reloading, and it's completely vulnerable to being rushed, pushed, and destroyed with its 29-second reload. However, its DPM is still pretty good, 2850 roughly. And that sort of shows you how scary this damage is. Despite having to reload for half a minute, it still manages to have a respectable DPM, and that just shows you that this output of damage is insane. And remember, that can be increased with the intraclip consumable. So next, penetration, AP of 270, heat of 350, and HE of 75. If we compare this to tank destroyers, it's not too impressive. AP of 350 is below average for sure. Most tier 10s have 280 to 290, or even up to 310. And heat 350, again, it's not terrible, but compared to tank destroyers, this is definitely below average. However, it's perfectly usable in most situations. There shouldn't be any issues with 350 heat. And HE 75 are slightly below average for a German 15cm gun. Most of them have between 80 and 85mm of penetration. However, 75 is definitely not bad at all. Aim time is 4.1/4.3. Again, it's not terrible for the alpha damage this does, but for a tank destroyer, it's definitely not impressive. Aim time, again, it's not terrible, but for a tank destroyer, not impressive. Dispersion, the same. It's not terrible, but not impressive. This dispersion is the same as a T110E4, which just does more alpha damage. And then, of course, gun handling. I said in the other review of this tank's other gun, this gun handling is actually okay, considering it has 0.18 on move, traverse, and on hull movement, which are better than average. The on-turret traverse dispersion is worse than average, but it's sort of compensated by this. So overall, it's okay. Gun depression, 6 over the front. It's a bit awkward with how big this tank is and having a rear-mounted turret, but 8 over the side is actually very nice. Makes it very flexible and more so than you might expect. Shell velocity, 930, 910, and 890. Not great, but definitely not bad at all. 930 for a 15cm gun is pretty good. Nowhere near as good as the other gun on this tank or the Grilla 15, but it's by no means bad at all, especially when you compare it to the Foch, which has standard ammo APCR but worse velocity than this. So overall, a good gun. For the opposite reasons of this other gun. This other gun is accurate and it has great penetration, but low alpha damage. This gun is not accurate, it doesn't have the best penetration, but it's very good at dishing out damage just because its alpha damage is high. It's good for trading, and you've got that amazing HE, which you can one clip a full health AMX 50B if you do penetrate all 3 shells. Which goes to show how much damage it does. But yeah, that is the gun. Let's get into the equipment. Also, you'll be able to see the gun in action in the gameplay. You'll be able to see what I mean, why it's broken for those 7 seconds. So again, I mentioned in the other review, improved ventilation on this tank makes a massive difference. And despite calibrated shells being the meta pick, the meta choice, let's be honest, you don't really need it. With how this tank plays, you generally aren't facing enemy heavy tanks especially, front on, head on, where they are just hull down, showing you their strongest frontal armor, and you can't penetrate them with 350 heat, and you need calibrated shells. That's just not happening in this tank in the majority of situations because of how you play. It's like an FV 4005, you have to play a bit of a support role. You're reacting to your team, the enemy team's actions, and you're taking those opportunistic maneuvers to try and get out the damage. So generally, you're not facing the strongest part of the enemy armor. A lot of the time, you've got the sides of enemy tanks, you've got the rears. Also, let's remember, you can activate the reticle calibration consumable if you really need to aim for a weak point. So yeah, calibrated shells has its uses, but for this tank, most of the time, it's overkill penetration because you're shooting the sides and rears of enemy tanks for a lot of the situations, or just your standard ammo is enough. Improved ventilation is actually very important, especially on this gun. Not only does it improve reload time by nearly a second, but the aim time is improved and the dispersion is improved. As said before, this tank's aim time and dispersion are both pretty poor, pretty unimpressive for a tank destroyer. So improving those is actually really helpful, really nice for this gun. And of course, let's not forget, a whole second off the reload time when you reload for 29 seconds is fairly significant. You may think, oh, well, I could just wait 1 more second. Yes, but still, having that 1 second faster reload when you're the longest reloading tank in the whole game is very nice, very useful. So I definitely say use vents. If you really feel you need calibrated shells, use it after trying vents out, because in most situations you just won't need it. You're shooting the sides, you're being opportunistic and flanking, or just coming out when enemies are distracted and not aiming at you, so most of the time you don't need the penetration. Next, camo net. This tank has terrible camo rating, just like the 183, so definitely you need that. Engine accelerator, because your traverse speed is fine, absolutely nothing wrong with it, so you don't need improved control. Next, improved assembly. Despite this tank having some armor, improved assembly doesn't do anything for it because enemies generally don't shoot your upper plate. When they do shoot your turret with HE, the flat areas aren't strong enough to be enhanced, and then the angled areas are stronger than most HE can go through, so they don't need enhancing. So generally, improved assembly, well, in all situations, improved assembly is the better choice. Next, gun lane drive, just because this tank's aim time. This gun's aim time isn't great. While its shell velocity isn't as impressive as the other gun or the Grilla 15, 930 meters per second is... there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and if you can't use that, I don't know, maybe don't play this tank because it really needs more help on the aim time than it does with the velocity. So 15% to aim time is a massive difference. You can see 0.5 seconds off the effective aim time, the estimated aim time. Makes a big difference on this gun, where you do need to aim in those shots carefully. Especially as if you miss, then there goes a third of your clip damage, a third of your DPM, well, a sixth of your DPM, because you do reload for 30 seconds basically. Next, vertical stabilizer. Again, this tank moves around a lot because it's fully turreted. You kind of have to point the turret over the rear or the sides to get the gun depression, and you are fairly mobile, so a lot of the times you are moving around to get that damage in effectively and, you know, maximize the time you are shooting because you have such a long reload. Vertical stabilizer is really useful just because this tank has that mobile sort of platform and that sort of mediocre turret traverse dispersion. Of course, let's not forget, it has an autoloader, so vertical stabilizer does help with that as well. Refined gun just isn't as useful in a lot of situations because you do have to stop and aim for longer, which this tank, it kind of needs to sort of aim in quickly and get the damage out because it's a fragile platform and because it kind of relies on dealing that damage quickly to be effective. Next, consumable delivery system, just because high-end consumables is completely useless on this tank. Remember, this tank deals its damage in 7 seconds. Reticle calibration lasts for 20. Shell reload boost lasts for 20. So you've got plenty of time, even if you activate these early, to be able to deal out your 7 seconds worth of damage. You don't need a longer duration on these. Also, note, due to how fast these cool down with consumable delivery system and the cooldown booster installed, you can basically use them one time every 2 magazines, which is a huge benefit to this tank. It makes it a lot more effective than other vehicles just because it's dealing out its damage, it's saving up all of its damage and its DPM and its effectiveness just for that 7-second duration. And considering you get to use these consumables 1 every 2 magazines, it just makes that 7-second duration so much more scary, so much more effective, so much more broken for dealing the damage. So definitely use consumable delivery system. And while we're here, of course, use this consumable setup because the tank relies so much on these to be really just a scary vehicle, an effective damage dealer within those 7 seconds. Shell reload boost makes you reload each shell in 2.47 seconds, which makes you unload your full 1700 damage in under 5 seconds, which is super fast. And of course, reticle calibration. Since this gun isn't as accurate as the other one, this one is all the more important for especially longer range shots, or if you've been moving and you sort of have to try and snap one in. It's also great for using HE, as this tank has amazing HE damage. And of course you need the restoration pack just to heal your crew when it's needed. It has the regular provisions, so I'd say use double food and fuel. If you feel that you get damaged a lot and this consumable just doesn't cut it, then you can replace it with protective kit. But I'd say don't start out using protective kit, that's just a bad idea. First, determine the need that you do actually need protective kit. Find out from gameplay experience that, oh wow, I'm getting a lot of module damage, I definitely need this. Just because if you drop food, you actually lose a fair bit of effectiveness from the gun, and again, this tank saves up all of its damage just for a 7-second duration, and that gun needs to be as effective as possible. So very briefly before gameplay, I'm going to show a few clips of the Waffentrager with this gun and why it's sort of so broken in the 7 seconds that it is unloading damage. So here we are on Normandy. I've just pushed forward and I spot a full health T-54. Activating the reticle calibration consumable, I could use shell reload boost, but this T-54 has no cover, so I'm just using the regular magazine reload, and look, there he goes, full 1600 hit points gone. So here we are on Fort Despair. I'm just waiting for the enemies to be spotted, and well, look at that, an FE 4005, 1 AP shot, 1 HE, and then another, and he's gone, full hit points, that FV, not using a sport liner. So here's another clip. In a sniping position, a Super Conqueror is spotted, and he's going to make a bit of a mistake as he pushes up too far, and I activate my consumables, putting in 2 shots into him. So there he goes, 1100 damage, hit points lost, and then I get another 800 into that FV, so 1900 hit points in just a few seconds. There we go. The last of these clips. I'm going to put in 3 shots into 3 separate vehicles. One into the E100 for 559, one into the VK90 for, how much was that? 533, and then one into the MX54 for 514. 2 low rolls, but again, I dealt massive damage in just a few seconds. So now let's get into the actual replays of the Waffentrager using this big gun. So I've got 3 replays. I do have one really cool 7k damage game with this gun, but I'm not going to review that replay in this video. I'll do it in a separate one just because I want to show these 3 battles which I have here for the representative gameplay of this gun. So again, just like with the other gun on this tank, and like the FE4005, this is an opportunistic sort of vehicle. It's got horrible camo rating and pretty bad armour. Fortunately, this Waffentrager is typing to his friend, so yeah, kind of blocks me. But this tank with very bad camo rating, large size, I'm a bit hesitant to actually go into this sniping position because I'm a very big tank and I will get spotted. But you can see I'm sort of watching the bush, waiting for something to happen. Again, I have to react to my and the enemy team's decisions in battle. I can't actually make pushes or plays myself. I'm just waiting for, well, damage to come to me, basically. And again, this is just like how the FE4005 or the other gun of this tank are. Just due to how long a reload you have and sort of how fragile you are. So I see that there's 2 light tanks getting spotted off to our sides. Notice the hit points of those tanks. There's the Avenir with 1650, and then there's this Object 84 with 1600. Look at that. 1 magazine dead, just like that T-54 you saw on Normandy earlier. So with a 28-second reload, I'm now pulling into cover, as I don't want to get shot by the Avenir. But I notice the E3 and the 268 are also on this side of the map, which is a bit concerning, considering both of those can penetrate me rather easily with an HE in the turret side. But now I'm expecting this 268 or the Avenir to push, so I'm not doing anything really. There's the Avenir. one shot into him with AP for 584, then I go for an HE shot, but he moves his track, so I only do 300. However, watch this. The HE damage on this is so good that even with one failed HE, I still managed to shut down the Avenir from full hit points. But here you'll see, yeah, I was completely broken in those 7 seconds unloading damage, but now I'm completely useless against this Object 268, which is just able to put in 3 shots of damage into me and finish me off, as you'll see there. However, notice what I did in this battle. 3,300 damage, killing 2 tanks from full hit points, both of them. And I did somehow manage to block 620. The Object 268 dies, nothing else happens in this battle, but that one just shows, really, this tank completely broken in those 7 seconds where it does unload damage. You can see this badge, 2 tanks from full hit points on my own, dealing a total of 3,300 damage. So yeah, that's the Waffentrager. Next I'll show the Canyon battle, wherever it is. Here it is. So this battle, again, you'll sort of see how I'm playing the vehicle. Starting out the beginning as a bit of a sniper, playing a bit carefully and not pushing forward, waiting for those opportunities where I can just put out the damage and then hide on my reload. So here you'll notice I'm going to go to the usual tank destroyer position on Canyon, just because it provides a pretty good opportunity for shooting both the heavy tanks and the mediums in the middle. Also there's this rock, which is pretty nice considering this tank is massive, and it does need that rock and the bush to conceal it and hide it when it does get spotted. You'll notice there the rock is just about big enough to cover the top of this tank. So here, just waiting, again, waiting for my team to do something, waiting for the enemies to get spotted and make a mistake. And oh, look at that, a mistake. There's the Jagdpanzer E100 getting ready to be shot for 1,700 hit points. And he bounces off me. So 1699, and I take 400 in return. The Jagdpanzer bounces very luckily, and that's one thing about this tank with its upper plate. If enemies rush their shots, there is a chance that they do bounce off, as that Jagdpanzer did. Unfortunately, I do take one in the side because of that E4, and my reverse speed only being 12, but, you know, it's alright. So here in this situation, loading heat with the E4, just hoping to be a bit lucky, but oh well. Now I'm going to hold my 2 shots just because I don't want to go on another 28-second reload just to get back 1 extra shell. It's not really that worth it, especially when there are a few targets around, such as that Jagdpanzer, which is down to a 1-shot. Unfortunately, the VK isn't able to finish him off, so I'm just waiting for him to make the same mistake he did just now, and oh, there he goes. I took out his full tank. And there is a Gorilla 15 off to the side. I'm hoping he pushes, and yep. So there you could see sort of the shell velocity of this tank, 930 meters per second. Not terrible at all, but you can tell that it's slower than the other gun, and of course the Gorilla 15, which is the other German sniping tank destroyer. Here, there's a full health BZ-70, well, not full health, 2,100 hit point BZ-75. I'm hoping for a full magazine. In this situation, notice now he has taken a shot from the concept. I'm almost reloaded and my magazine does 1,710 damage. So, within the next 7 seconds, this BZ-75 is going to die either way. And here we go. I'm going to try track him so he can't actually reverse around the corner, and unfortunately, kill gets stolen. But either way, that guy would have been dead, or as good as dead, because if the 183 didn't shoot him, I would have. If I low rolled, the concept would have killed him. So you can see how influential that massive damage is within that 7-second time when you are unloading. Another thing to note, that WZ just tried to shoot me with HE. In fact, I took 2 HE shells in this game on the exact same place on either side of the turret. And you'll see, because of where that WZ shot me, because of the angle it was at, he didn't actually manage to penetrate, doing only 400 damage out of his 960. However, he was pretty close to hitting the penetrable area, so you do have to watch out a bit, but that turret armor is still a lot better than the FV4005. So you'll see I'm being a bit careful as I don't want to die to him, but now that he's shot, I'm going to push forward, put in a shot, which, again, this tank has a turret, so it's pretty nice for setting up shots like that against that WZ. Unfortunately, accuracy not quite able to get that Sheridan, and now I'm just hoping for another shot on him without him poking out and actually killing me, as I am down to a 1 shot now. No idea where that shot goes, but oh well. And then that's it for this battle. The Sheridan gets shut down because he runs straight into that FV215B183. But in that game, you can see, again, taking up a sort of opportunistic position and sniping, and then pushing forward when there was sort of space and the area for me to do so, since my allies had cleared the danger to my tank, making 176,000 credits in that battle because it was an ace. And then the final game, which I will show for this video. Again, I did have a great 7k battle, but I'm not going to show it in this one. I don't believe that's the regular sort of battle you'd have in this vehicle. However, that 7k damage game is a good representation of how this tank is balanced. Completely broken in that 7-second time when you're unloading damage, so if you can literally completely get rid of the 30-second downtime when you're not shooting, and maximize on that 7 seconds, then this tank is insanely strong in terms of its damage output. A bit like a 183 or a 4005, for example, just sort of min-maxing on that 7-second damage output a bit more than those other vehicles. And you'll see that with really how long this tank reloads. So here, a Minotauro pushing up. This is a situation where calibrated shells would be nice. However, again, what a niche situation. I do manage to hit his lower plate anyway. Second shot misses into the rock. And then third one goes right in. So while yes, calibrated shells would have been nice to penetrate more of his lower plate, it wasn't needed, and it's such a niche situation. So dealing 1,144 to that Minotauro there. Unfortunately, I do take quite a bit of damage in exchange, maybe not the best trade on my part. However, again, notice my positioning. My allies are now pushing in front of me, they're taking the hits. I'm using the bush to sort of hide my terrible size and camo rating. And now, seeing an opportunity, the E100 has sort of over-pushed, and there's now Kranvang pushing down to help the Leopard. I'm thinking, that's a lot of juicy hit points, I'm going to try take some. And then, oh look, there's the Minotauro. So unfortunately I'm not able to quite get in that second shot, but it's okay. I'll just put in another there. And that's one thing that's really nice about having an autoloader. You do just have those second opportunities to take a kill shot on enemy vehicles. And of course, with this tank's high alpha damage, it only takes a few to secure a kill shot, as you can see against that Minotauro. So here, being almost reloaded, that E100 down to 1 clippable, and the Caro down to 300 hit points. I'm going to push forward, irrelevant of if I die or not, just because my team has so many tanks left. So here we go, E100, 1400 hit points. 1 shot, 2 shots, and he's dead. Yeah, 1700 hit points gone just like that. Well, 1400-ish. Here I'm going to go for something a bit interesting. Try and ram the Caro. with this tank's 83-ton weight, but he does avoid me, so oh well. But yeah, again, notice the tank's damage output, completely insane for the time it is unloading the damage. Basically unstoppable and uncounterable, because honestly, what do you do against that? You'd need the equivalent of 3 Guerrilla 15s to shoot you at the exact same time, to sort of counteract the damage this tank does. But 110,000 credits made in that battle, doing most 4,000 damage. So yeah, the 3-shot gun on the Waffentrager is definitely the meta gun for this tank. It's also really fun when you can penetrate HE. As said, it can one clip basically any tank from full hit points, as the HE magazine does almost 2,700 hit points of damage. But yeah, so this tank with this gun, it's definitely more meta than the other gun. However, again, it's still not a super strong tank. Again, it's broken for 7 seconds while it's unloading its damage, but then after that it's down and out for 28 seconds, and it's very vulnerable in that time. Very team reliant vehicle, very battle reliant vehicle. If the battle doesn't if the stars don't align, you aren't going to do anything too amazing. However, just because it has such a large magazine, in almost all battles, you're almost guaranteed to get 1,700 damage just for staying alive and putting in one clip at the end of the battle. However, I definitely wouldn't recommend just trying to rely on that. Risking it in this vehicle is worth it, just because when you do risk it, you can get the gun to be quite insane with the things you can achieve. Of course, it's broken for 7 seconds while you're shooting the gun, so risk it and try to get the damage. But yeah, this tank, pretty rare at the moment at least. Very interesting vehicle, very unique and very interesting in terms of its balance. If it's the sort of vehicle that interests you, then I'd say yeah, get it. If it comes back for gold in the future, I definitely wouldn't recommend gambling on this vehicle as it releases, due to its terrible drop chance and high cost. But yeah, interesting vehicle. I don't think it breaks the balance of Blitz, however, just due to how it is balanced, it's going to feel like quite a toxic tank to play against. You could see in the clips that I showed, killing tier 9 medium and light tanks from full hit points. And of course with the HE you can full health a AMX 50B from the side. Things like that, they will happen with this vehicle, and it will feel very unfair, but you have to remember this tank has a massive downside where it's just not doing anything for almost 30 seconds. But yeah, that is the Waffentrager with the 15cm gun. If you want to see the 12.8cm, go watch the other review video, and I believe I'll post a video of the 7k damage battle soon-ish from the release of this one. But yeah, thanks for watching.